Another research project out here at the Bixby Vegetable Research Station involves tomatoes. And here to tell us a little bit about this study is vegetable specialist Dr. Brian Kahn. Hey Brian, welcome back to the show.
Hi Steve, thanks.
Well Brian, I look at this study of tomatoes, and right here, this group of tomatoes, looks like you guys came out here with a can of white spray paint and just painted these tomatoes. What have we got going on here?
Well, these are the famous whitewash tomatoes. Not really. What they've been sprayed with is a material called Surround, which is a trademark. But Surround is a kaolin clay product, and it's basically like putting white mud on the plants.
Okay. And why do we have it? Why is it coated on the tomatoes? What does it do? What does it help?
Well, there's a couple of different things that we're looking at with this. This is a material that's been studied quite a bit in fruit crops, but less in vegetables. So we're just beginning to look at it now on vegetables. It reflects some of the sun's heat and may reduce heat stress on the plant, but also it's supposed to make the plant a lot less attractive to insects. And that's the specific thing that we're after in this study, is we're trying to discourage insects, especially a leafhopper that would vector the beet curly-top virus.
That virus that we had such a problem with about 3 years ago.
In 2003, that was the virus that just decimated tomatoes here at Bixby and around the state. Fortunately, it's been sporadic since then, and it's pretty sporadic this year. But we're still looking at different ways to control that insect and other ones.
Okay, well I'm glad we haven't been seeing that beet curly top virus showing up anymore. Well, with all this material, this little fine sprayed on particles of clay, does that hurt the plant in any way?
We really don't know. This is the second year of the study, and last year we noticed a reduction in the marketable tomato yield with the plots that had had the Surround. Now, we don't know if that's going to happen again, and if it does, we've got to try to figure out why. Or maybe it was just a one-year thing.
Okay. And how often do you guys apply the clay product?
That's another thing that we're having to work out. We started our treatments shortly after the transplants were set in the field. But what we need to learn is, when do we discontinue it? And so we've had 3 different treatments in here. We've either stopped spraying at what we call anthesis, which is when we see basically the first flush of full blooms on the plant, or when we've got little green fruit that are about maybe 2 inches or so in diameter on the plant. That's another stopping point. Or the one that's being filmed right now, where we kept spraying right up until we had the first ripe fruit harvested, and then we stopped.
Okay, and one of the reasons you're wanting to stop is because it is a little bit hard to wash that off of the fruit?
Right. This is a material that's Organic Institute listed. It's perfectly safe, but it is like sticky white mud, and it is somewhat hard to wash off the fruit. It also makes it a little harder to tell when the tomato is actually turning red, because if it's coated with white,
yeah,
you can't really see it.
Yeah, it'd be hard to see that. Well, right down here, you kind of continue with this study, and this is kind of your control group. We don't have the kaolin on here?
It's what we would call a control. This has just been sprayed with ordinary water. The Surround is mixed up with water and sprayed on the plants. Well, this is a control to see, okay, if we just spray it with plain water, is that having any effect or not? That's just something that we do in research to provide a control, to provide a test to check against with our treatment.
Okay, way to keep track of those results. Well, here with this control treatment and with the Surround treatment as well, I can see you guys have the stake and weave method of keeping the tomato plants contained, where you put the stakes in the ground about every 4 feet and then just weave the twine back and forth and kind of cinch up those tomatoes and kind of keep them off the ground and makes them a little bit easier to pick.
Right. And this is the major method of support that's used for commercial fresh market tomato production throughout the United States and in Oklahoma. But there is an alternative. You see over here in this guard row, we've got some cages that were made out of concrete reinforcing wire. These are a little bit easier to put on, because you would just put it on when the transplant's young, just pop the cage over, and then with just minimal training, it'll stay within it, as opposed to with the stake and weave, you have to come back periodically and add strings. The disadvantage of this, though, is it's harder to see the ripe tomatoes. You have to kind of get there and dig in the cage a little bit. A little harder to see.
Okay, well we do this back at our studio garden where we grow the indeterminate varieties of tomatoes that just go everywhere. And of course, these are the determinate varieties. They're a little bit more compact, a little bit better behaved, I guess, tomatoes, and they kind of top out a little bit early.
Right, they won't turn into a 6-foot giant. They'll get a little bit further above the cage, and then they'll be pretty much finished.
Okay. Well, Brian, I guess you guys are looking at some eggplant again this year?
We sure are.
Let's take a look at that.
All right.
Well, Brian, at our studio gardens, or near our studio gardens at Stillwater last year, we did a segment on eggplant, and you had planted all of these really bizarre varieties, lots of different types of eggplants. But over here in Bixby last year at the same time, you had a different study going on with eggplant?
Right, we had, this is where we had the big oval and purple ones. It was a conventional eggplant variety trial, but we were also looking at some other things like plant architecture.
Okay, and how many different varieties do you have in this study?
Well, this is a repeat of that 2005 study, and once again we've got 11 varieties in here.
Okay, and by the architecture study of the plant, what exactly are you looking at there?
Well, in addition to just regular yield data, we're trying to figure out where on the plant that fruit arises and how far off the ground it is architecturally. Where is it on the plant? Plus, we're following the progress of the yield throughout the season, because you know you're going to pick eggplant for 7 or 8 weeks. And we're trying to, with the help of Dr. Mark Payton in the statistics department, we're trying to apply a statistical model to model that yield pattern to help better understand about concentration of yield and peak harvest and that sort of thing.
Okay, so where the eggplants are actually produced on the plant. Can you show us just an idea down here about what you're talking about?
You bet. Here's a nice fruit here, and one of the things that we do is we would get down and we would measure how high that fruit is off of the ground where the stem connects to it, which is about 28 centimeters.
Okay.
And then we'd look at how high the blossom end is, and it's about 8 centimeters off the ground. And then we would actually clip it and measure the length. It's got a little bit of a scar on it, but it's still marketable. And we would weigh it, and then we'd record it. And what's different about this from a normal yield trial, Steve, is that in this case, we're monitoring not only individual plants, but every individual fruit that we pick, we're going to have data on. So we have 99 individual plants that we're monitoring, and it's a very detailed study.
Okay, so every fruit that is produced on those 99 plants you're measuring.
Marketable or cull, we're measuring it, we're knowing where it was on the plant, how big it was, so forth, and modeling the progress of that yield through the year.
Okay, well, you were telling me that in some places where they grow a lot of eggplant, they actually use the stake and weave method like the tomatoes.
Right, that's one of the more practical outcomes of this study is once we know where those fruits are arising on the plant and whether or not they're touching the ground, by having data on each individual fruit we can tell if it makes a difference or not, whether it's going to be a cull or marketable. An eggplant is more of an upright plant overall than a tomato, and the fruit have more of a tendency to stay off the ground or maybe just touch their blossom ends, and they're less likely to have ground rot. But we don't really know if there's a necessity or an advantage to having them trellised up, or maybe if we show that there's no relationship between position of the fruit and culls, then maybe you don't need the labor and expense of that trellis system, and growing them like this, which is the common way they're grown in Oklahoma, it may be good enough.
Okay, so maybe it may not make that much of a difference where the eggplants are.
It may not, but we need to learn that.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a pretty intensive study, and one that when you're out here measuring all these, that you get really dirty, and looks like a lot of hard work, and I wish you luck in getting good results.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.